So we've talked about combat, we've talked about what you can do outside of combat, and that's going to account for a lot of your gameplay, but one of the core pieces of artifacts is, you guessed it, artifacts. So what are they? How do they affect the game? What kinds of things are players and characters going to be doing with artifacts? Well, artifacts are these powerful objects that have a unlimited kind of range of what they can do. They can produce almost any kind of reaction, and this can happen from any kind of trigger. So a reaction is the outcome you're going to have. An artifact might explode, it might cure an illness, it might cause plants to grow in the area, it might shroud the area in darkness. Really anything you could imagine an artifact could do. What's going to trigger it? Well, same kind of thing. Maybe extreme heat triggers it. Maybe exposure to light or darkness is going to trigger the artifact. Maybe even just feeling an emotion next to an artifact is what's actually going to trigger it to react. Now, when it reacts, it can do one of a couple things. It can either produce the effect and maintain just the same as it was before. It could produce the effect again, or the artifact is going to be partially or entirely harvested. Now, what is harvesting? Well, harvesting artifacts is where shards come from. So let's say you expose an artifact to fire, for example, some extreme heat, and it causes it to explode. Well, that might harvest the artifact and produce a number of shards to whoever did that. They can scoop up those shards, infuse their equipment with them, and the artifact can no longer be triggered because it exploded. These shards are what powers all artifacts. It sits within them. Shards have spirit within them. And so this is why people go after artifacts so often, is because shards are going to imbue equipment to make them extremely powerful. So it becomes this currency that, kingdoms and adventurers and everyone is going to be after. More important than any other kind of currency you can imagine. So if we go down here in the artifacts, there's a number of examples of this artifact contains 800 shards, and doing this trigger is going to produce this effect, and it'll kind of give you an idea of the sorts of things you can have within the game. Feel free to get creative with it. I mean, these examples are really here just to give you an idea of what artifacts are going to be like, just so you can kind of get into the setting. But this is really where the game master should take some time to think, all right, how is the world going to be shaped by these artifacts? Because they're what produces monsters, they're what produce anomalies, they're what creates artifact shards, which are incredibly important for equipment, currency, right? So yeah, the world is going to be impacted greatly by things, and it's really important that the game master takes some time to figure out how they're going to actually affect things. So in a setting like this, as a game master, you might say, okay, well, maybe we're out here, we're in the forest, we're wandering around. To kind of give a clue to players, maybe I say that these trees over here, they're much greener, they've grown much taller, maybe they're even moving, they could be sentient, something like that. That would be a good clue that there's an artifact here, or maybe an artifact has been here previously that has already been taken away from this area. These are the kinds of things that players should be looking at to understand, alright, maybe this is where an artifact is, and maybe this is a great opportunity for us to get something that is powerful, or that will give us a lot of currency, or it's maybe a thing to, hey, we should stay away from there. That's a dangerous area. I don't think we're ready to take on whatever is causing, maybe these monstrous trees to spawn in the area. It's going to drive a lot of story. Now, one thing with artifacts to note is their ability to produce mutations. So mutations, as I kind of talked about earlier when you're creating a character, an anomaly is just a mutated human. if an artifact is powerful enough, it will mutate a human into an anomaly, and that's when they gain their vocation. That's how players start, as though it's already happened. But this could, of course, happen in play to other human characters, and of course it's something that could change the world and how they're perceived. Do people actually like anomalies? Do they want to become anomalies and they seek these artifacts out? Or do they think they're grotesque and they don't want to be this mutated creature, even though they're physically more powerful? So, when does an artifact mutate humans or monsters or anomalies further? Well, for every 1,000 shards that an artifact produces when it's harvested, it's going to give one mutation to an anomaly. Now, if you remember, we have 0 mutations here. So if we harvest a artifact with 3,000 shards, well, it's going to give us 3 mutations. If we're a human and an artifact reacts and it has 1,000 shards within it, it's going to turn that human into an anomaly. Now, if an artifact reacts and it doesn't harvest the artifact, no shards come out of it, then it's not going to mutate anyone. And if the artifact reacts and it's got less than 1,000, 800 shards, well, that's not going to mutate anyone either. So you can see that here in these examples, it kind of goes over it. In some cases, like here, 2,300 shards is going to provide 2 mutations to all anomalies and turn nearby humans into anomalies, that kind of thing. So just a good idea of how much you're going to get. Whereas 800, of course, no mutations. 300, no mutations. So that's kind of artifacts in a nutshell. I think this will be a really good inspiration for anyone to read about. And we'll get into, what are these mutations? What kinds of effects do they have on anomalies? Why are they important to the characters in the next video?